Well, looky there. YouTube Live. Who knew? Goodbye, Facebook. Bam. Good morning. Welcome back to the Red Mic. Happy Tuesday. Glad you're here. Facebook Live completely let me down this morning. So, what are you going to do? Glad you're here. Red Mic messages are leadership and life lessons picked up from 25 years as a public servant, 16 years as a youth football coach and scouting volunteer, and 10 years as a mediocre athlete with far more heart than actual physical ability. Today's Red Mic message: don't confuse a crack with a collapse. What do I mean by that? Well, a few years ago, a headline hit that sounded like the sky was falling, the ground was shifting under our feet, everything was going to blow up and destroy the U.S. economy with it. China brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. There was talk of oil being traded in yuan instead of dollars, whispers of a new global alliance forming without the United States. And just like that, people started saying, this is it. The old system's over. But you know what? A crack in the wall is not the same as the building coming down. Whether you're in government, business, or just watching the markets, if you've been paying attention long enough, you're going to notice recurring patterns. A real event happens, and then the perception or the interpretation really outruns the reality. It's a huge knee-jerk reaction. And we've seen this movie before. Back in 2012, there was a wave of productions that the euro was about to collapse, that the entire European financial system was on the brink and countries would start peeling off one by one. Markets panicked, headlines screamed, experts lined up on both sides. But you know what? The euro did not collapse. It bent, it strained, it adjusted, but it held. The real problems weren't real. I mean, the problems weren't, it's not that the problems weren't real, they were real. But systems that big don't disappear overnight, they adapt under pressure. Scott Adams referred to it as his theory of the slow moving disaster. His whole concept there was, if you have enough time, you can make things work. You can adapt, you can figure it out. Let's go back a little further. 2010 or so, there was talk that China was to dump U.S. Treasury bonds and trigger a financial crisis. The idea was that if China pulled the plug, the whole system would unravel. Now, you got to remember, 2010, that was just a couple of years after the whole, subprime debacle and all of that. We weren't in good financial shape, but it never happened because what sounded like leverage was actually mutual dependence. China needed the system to hold up just as much as we did. And that's the part that people miss when they're caught up in that moment of frenzy, when they're analyzing all of the tea leaves. It has them just, like that guy, the crazy guy pointing to all the threads connecting on the wall. The deeper structure matters more than the surface event. And, in football, you see this all the time. You got a busted play, blown coverage, a turnover, and then you can see the enthusiasm or the confidence on the sideline just drop like the game is over. Heads drop, energy disappears. They stop playing their assignment and they start playing the moment. Coaches hate that because one bad play or a series of bad plays does not lose a game. But if you lose your discipline, that's an easy way to lose. And truth be told, losing your discipline has caused more losses than any bad play ever. Don't confuse a problem with a collapse. Now, let's bring back that geopolitical moment from a couple of years ago. What happened was real. It mattered. It told us something important. The world is getting more complicated, more competitive, more crowded. There's more players at the table. There's more regional deals. There's more experiments around the edges of the system. But that's not the same thing as the center going away. It didn't mean that the US was out of the game. It didn't mean that our alliances disappeared overnight. It didn't flip the entire system on its head. It just meant the game got tighter. It was moving from college ball to the pros, a little bit faster, a little bit more precise, stakes maybe a little bit higher, but the game was the same. Tighter games require better discipline, not louder reactions. So, leaders, whether you're running a country, a company, or a team, you have to be able to tell the difference between a signal and a story that we tell each other about that signal. Because the story is where things really get dangerous, where they really get blown out of whack. Because the story fills in gaps, the story assumes intent, the story jumps to outcomes that haven't even happened yet. If you start leading on the story instead of the signal, you are going to make bad decisions and you're going to make them fast. Because if you overreact to every crack, you'll abandon what's working before it actually stops working. You're going to overcorrect into strategies that haven't been tested. You're going to burn resources chasing problems that aren't fully formed. And you're going to make bigger mistakes than the original issue would have ever caused. Good leaders, strong leaders, they stay steady. They don't ignore the crack. They don't pretend that it's not there, but they don't let it dictate their entire posture. They ask better questions. Is this structural or situational? Who benefits if this narrative spreads? What incentives are actually in play beneath the surface? What hasn't changed that still matters? They see the crack, they understand it, they adjust, but they don't start acting like the whole house is falling down when it's not, because panic is rarely about reality. It's about interpretation. And interpretation, if you're not careful, will beat you long before your opponent ever does. So remember, not every disruption is a collapse. You have to learn to measure scale before reacting. Separate facts from the narrative. Look underneath the headline. Understand incentives, understand interdependence, because overreaction creates more damage than the original problem. So stay disciplined when others get emotional, because that's where your advantage lives. Ask better questions before making big moves, because the people who win are the ones who keep playing their assignment when things get noisy. And that's today's Red Mike message. Hope you found it interesting or helpful. I hope you're able to put some of these things in place in your own life. Facebook Live completely let me down today. The little spinny thing just kept going and going and going, so I ended it. Who knows? Maybe YouTube Live is where I live now. We shall see. I love you guys. Please give me a like, a follow, and a share. If you liked today, let me know in the comments. If you didn't like today, let me know in the comments. I'll see you again tomorrow. And until next time, don't forget, life is short. Drink the bourbon.